York, Tokyo, London, Singapore. Today, more people live in cities than ever before in human history.
The cities are the drivers of the economy. The cities are drivers of innovation, of creativity, of exchange, of human relations, of everything.
With this massive shift taking place in every corner of the globe, urban centers have become critical to human civilization.
I think we're in a real crisis period. More and more people are moving into cities, and that puts immense pressures on urban infrastructure.
Our lives are increasingly shaped by our cities. But can they meet the needs of an urban future?
We live in cities now as a species, and there's no going back.
What holds the key to success in a 21st century living city? Cities relentlessly construct and demolish themselves on their path for economic growth. But how do they navigate their future, keeping their past intact? A livable city is one where its residents share a sense of belonging, a common link with their heritage that will pass down to its future residents.
A city that has no sense of its past is rather like a person suffering from amnesia. You don't know your own identity if you've lost your grip on your history. If you can't walk around the streets and feel connected to the people who lived there before you, generations before, then you're kind of unmoored. You're lost, you're adrift.
Singapore's ever-changing skyline is testament to the many times it has reinvented itself. But its commitment to preserving its architectural history begins right in the heart of the city. The Singapore Civic District has been the center of the island since its formation as a straight settlement. Standing tall among the heritage buildings are the old Supreme Court and City Hall, structures that have been a defining part of Singapore's history.
Good morning, Urban Sketchers. This space that we are standing here is actually a very significant space in the history of Singapore. 12 September 1945, Lord Louis Mountbatten accepted the surrender of the Japanese that ended the World War II.
Dr. Yeo Kang Shua is a historian and conservation consultant. Today, he's leading a group of artists on an architectural tour of the Civic District.
This building, completed in 1929, was built by Gordon and Meadows. Was built in the neoclassical style. Here we have very imposing rows of colonnades. These columns were actually cast by an Italian sculptor called Nolli. Nolli honed his skills on these buildings, and 10 years later, he cast the stone of the building next door, the Supreme Court.
The Sketchers are here to illustrate these buildings before they're refurbished into the new National Art Gallery of Singapore. It is a worldwide fraternity of sketch artists who document the cities and neighborhoods they live in.
When you are sketching, we are recording the place and time and that moment. 20 of us sketch the same thing, but you come up with 20 different ideas and 20 different scenes, different composition, different style.
The Sketchers are here to illustrate these buildings before they're refurbished into the new National Art Gallery of Singapore. This gallery aims to be a civic and creative space that will transform the local and regional art scene.
City Hall building, it will be mainly used to house our Singapore Permanent Collection. There will also be an art education centre, gallery spaces for international temporary exhibitions. And for Supreme Court building, it will mainly be used to house our Southeast Asia Permanent Collection.
I think cities can recover a sense of their past, maybe by not bulldozing everything. If you retain the building stock, if you adapt buildings to new purposes. One of the ways in which you can feel connected with the past of your city is just by seeing the traces of what came before.
We welcome urban sketchers to this court. This is a court of appeal, the highest court in the land of Singapore. In the center of the courtroom is the dock. The dock is where the prisoners will be led from a passageway by the court security or police up into the dock and a secured path and face the court and face his destiny. So this is one of the last places that one would want to find himself to be.
This monument was the last classical-style structure built in Singapore. Its 5 courtrooms adorn heavy timber panels and Art Deco light lanterns that have witnessed decades of trials and hearings. These corridors may be silent for now, but in a few years, these symbols of law and power will get a new lease of life as icons of Southeast Asian art.
I think a lot of people need to appreciate this building as a piece of art, just like artworks will be going to be hung on the walls of the National Art Gallery. The artwork is a piece of art, the building is a piece of art.
The architectural heritage of a city is under constant pressure from the forces of change. But with a few slight adjustments, historical buildings can find a crucial place in our designs for the future. Singapore has cemented its position in the global marketplace as a crosspoint for goods and services. It has built a reputation as a shopping paradise that has attracted buyers and traders throughout its history. But in the shadow of the big brands is an enclave of history. Kampong Glam is an old trading neighborhood once popular with Arab merchants who plied their wares on its streets. Even to this day, it has managed to stay current in a globalized economy.
We're here at the Kampong Glam neighborhood. It was actually set up in 1824 by Sir Stamford Raffles, and he allocated that as a Muslim quarter. As you can see, a lot of the neighborhood is really heavily influenced by that. That's partly why I decided to move here.
Suraj Malwani is a banker turned fashion designer who left a job in New York to open a boutique clothing line. Deciding against the high streets of Singapore, Suraj bought his shop house from a traditional perfumer in Haji Lane to kickstart his own fashion label.
I was sort of the new gardener that came by and gave this place a different vibe to it. The space was really conducive to, running a business that was kind of charming in its own right.
Over the years, Haji Lane has attracted the city's designers and artists who have moved here and transformed the old shop houses with their own unique stamp.
Artists need places to go, places to work. What they do generally in cities is move to the cheapest, scabbiest, scrubbiest, most neglected area, and then they colonise it. They do their work there. So artists are like the outriders for a process of urban regeneration.
When I first moved here to Haji Lane, I used to walk by this shop house over here, right behind me, and it was really interesting because I used to walk by it every day, and it was just, I noticed that it was a derelict old abandoned building. How are you, Jay? How's it going?
How are you?
You alright? Yeah, good.
Artist and set designer Jay Hammond is now restoring this building into a restaurant with his trademark mosaic art.
I remember when I first came, it was a fabric shop. They sold, little old man sold fabric. I think up to here was divided off. Okay. So that was his shop, this was home, and there used to be a staircase going up here somewhere. And then he left, caught fire, and then that's when they closed it all off.
It's really cool to see the whole place getting a new lease on life, literally, It all takes some creative individual to come in and have a vision, and it's back up again.
With the younger, hip tenants, it may seem there's little space for the traditional, but in this neighborhood, the old and the new maintain a symbiotic relationship.
This is a really cool check fabric that's actually just treated already so that you don't really have to wash because it looks like it's been sitting on your floor for the last month. If you dig through, you'll find something really interesting. So as you can see, the proximity is really small. I walked right out of the fabric store and into our store. I want these clothes to really tell a story. I want to serve a purpose, you know, rather than just being another fashion label that's out there, like what we've done with the space, and again, just like who we are as people, you know. When people think about Singapore, and they think about the biggest, finest, fanciest buildings and fanciest stores and boutiques, you know, but not very many people think about, you know, spaces like this and beautiful buildings that have remained like this for about 100 years. It'll always constantly evolve until we've probably taken over every neighborhood that has shop houses in there, you know, because that's our way of saying, let's preserve this, let's be a part of this.
Preserving the cultural heritage of Singapore also is very important, and too much has been already lost and demolished in the renewal process of rebuilding the city. So the little that is left has to be maintained, but not turned into some kind of Disneyland, Disneyfication. They have to be brought to new uses.
As Suraj heads on to the next stage of his life, Haji Lane too is heading towards a more certain future. Its past safe in the hands of its trendy new residents. Livable cities are not just well-designed blocks of steel and concrete. They are alive, breathing forms, in constant dialogue with the senses of its residents. One of the important links to a city are its smells.
We're very attuned to smell, and actually, you know, our memory, the way our memory works, is very much to do with how we recall smells and tastes. So it's very evocative.
Food is Singapore's national obsession. Its flavors and tastes are ambassadors of its multicultural heritage. It is the umbilical cord that connects Singaporeans to their home.
You are what you eat, and because we are what we eat, society is what it eats, and cities are what they eat. You know, it's absolutely fundamental to who we are and how we build our communities and our societies.
Leslie Tay is a full-time doctor and part-time food blogger, passionate about documenting Singapore's food history.
It might be difficult to imagine, but this is just right next door to our shopping district, just behind. Most of this used to be markets, but they've all been demolished to make way for progress. Surola, take a picture. This particular place is still selling much the same as what I ate in the past. And you know, it's just a very familiar, very comforting kind of smell.
Food rituals provide us with a sense of belonging and connectedness with our communities. The egg and coconut jam called kaya is an indispensable part of Singapore's breakfast culture that is truly identifiable with the city.
This is a typical Singaporean breakfast. We have kopi, the soft-boiled eggs, and we have toast. You see the butter is not completely melted. That's the beauty of eating kaya toast. You want the butter to be nice and firm on the inside so that you have that contrast of texture. I'll show you what the Singaporeans in the past will do. You pour the coffee onto the saucer. So then you use the saucer, you take it up. And then of course the eggs. You know, we have 2 eggs. So typically you have your dark soy sauce, and you have your pepper, soy sauce from the east, pepper from the west, typical Singaporean breakfast.
The typical Singaporean breakfast has managed to retain its local flavor in a globalized world. Today, traditional coffee shops are part of a multi-million-dollar industry that hinges on serving local fare. One of the most popular local brands is Ya Kun Kaya Toast, a small stall started by a Hainanese immigrant in 1943 that has since grown into an empire that serves more than 20,000 slices of toast a day.
Everything is exactly the same what we did long time ago. We do exactly what my father used to do.
Algie Low is a scion of the Ya Kun coffee shop business and prides himself on making the perfect kaya toast.
You must toast the brown bread evenly to the golden brown so that it will be crispy. Then once you bite into it, you can bite into the kaya and also the butter. The thing will fuse together, then it will melt in your mouth. Charcoal grills give a much better flavor, and then the heat is not as great as those electrical grills.
Even as Singapore's tastes have evolved over the years, Algie has worked hard to keep the business rooted in tradition.
Now we still talk to the customer, we still collect money the same old way, we still write the table number, everything on the board. The coffee remains the same traditional cups, and the eggs still boil the same way it was in the past. Table 6.
If we lose our sense of our own food identity, it's fundamental to losing a sense of who we are. For a city to be successful, it seems to me, and to allow that kind of food culture to grow and to then start to fuse and so on, is one of the most powerful things it can do in making people feel at home.
Food elevates the intimacy between a city and its residents. Even a simple kaya jam toast can cement memories of childhoods and neighborhoods, becoming part of Singapore's collective memory. The heritage of a city is not purely its physical infrastructure, but the cultural heritage of its people that needs to be actively cultivated and sustained.
Well, I think people are the city, everywhere, not just in Singapore. Without people, no city. There is no purpose of a city. And that is an enormous asset to build upon, to have this diversity and to have this ability to cater for so many different cultures.
The first wave of immigrants arrived in Singapore soon after it became a Strait settlement in 1826. This formed the backbone of its multi-ethnicity that is evident even to this day. One identity that represents Singapore's multiculturalism is of the Peranakans, a community that evolved from the 15th century Chinese migration to Southeast Asia.
The word Peranakan in Malay means locally born. A Peranakan Chinese is a result of an intermarriage between a Chinese man intermarrying a local woman.
Alvin Yap is a Peranakan and an antique collector, specializing in heirlooms that have passed down through generations of Peranakan families.
The Peranakans were known to be the aristocrats at that time. They were the wealthiest of the wealthiest in society. They were the middlemen between the local community and the Chinese community. Plus, most importantly, they embraced Western culture very easily.
This fusion of identity is evident in the architecture found in the eastern suburbs of Singapore, a part of town Alvin has made his home.
This is what we would call very typical Peranakan homes, where you have 2 stories and the windows are very small. You notice that the houses here also have a bit of a European influence to them. Like the pillars, they almost look Roman or Greek in style. In the past, they didn't have addresses like what we have today. They would have the family name painted on the lanterns, and a visitor would know who the owner was based on the family name on the lantern.
Over the years, Alvin's home has transformed into a walk-in museum where he educates the community of its Peranakan heritage.
In the Peranakan home, the reception hall, you will also see a piece of furniture like this. Now, This is what we call a sideboard, an English sideboard. So you can see that the form is Western, but the Peranakans infuse local motifs into them. So you have like the phoenix on the top, you have a Malay lattice work happening here, and when you go all the way down, you will see the Chinese claws all over again. So this is 100% Peranakan, because if not for the Peranakan, a piece of furniture like this would not have existed.
Alvin's collection tells a story of a Peranakan community at its peak, but he is a product of a different generation.
Growing up, it was interesting because we were going through a period where the Peranakans were perhaps not recognized as Peranakans as much as they wanted to be. When they were the upper class before the war, they became middle class or lower class after the war.
Young Peranakans like Shermaine and Derek have inherited the baton of a diluted culture, but their curiosity of their heritage has brought them to Alvin's doorstep.
So guys, do you know what this is?
I don't know.
Make a guess.
You try. A hook? No.
This is actually a key holder, right? So you remember when the Peranakan women, when they wore their sarongs and their kebayas, right? They didn't have pockets in the sarongs. So they would hook it onto the sarong, right? And this is where they would hang their keys. And every lady worth her salt would at least have one key holder. So I'm sure you've seen this, right?
Yeah.
As an antique collector, I am privileged and I get very inspired and very motivated when I am able to see the interest in a young person to want to know his identity. So it tells you how bold the ladies were at that time to wear something like this.
We don't use these things anymore. It doesn't seem to be a prerequisite of what we do or how we live or part of our culture.
So if I don't make the effort to learn from my mom or my grandmother, it's going to be too late. I'll never be able to pass that on to my kids.
As Singapore becomes more multiracial, each subsequent generation will grapple with the complex questions of identity. With a city that provides spaces for communities to flourish and preserve their heritage, the future of the Peranakans remains promising.
See all my bibis in beautiful, colorful kebayas, and that's where they can identify we are the Peranakan.
Well, the idea of heritage is very important. It's often not really about history. History and heritage are very different things. Heritage can be an absolute fantasy, but as long as it's a shared fantasy, a kind of collective fantasy about what the past was like, then it can usefully inform the present and usefully inform people's sense of identity.